Bhargav. Great. We're live on YouTube now, so.
Matthew, all the judges are here, right?
Yeah, everybody's here. So just a quick roll call.
Cool,
Bhargav is
perfect.
here. Uh, yeah, Bhargav, Avi, Abir, Swikriti, Shirish. Yeah, five-member panel. Perfect. Bhargav, you will, I believe you will do the introduction and all. You're the chair in the room.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Riju, can you run this room with the timer and all?
Okay, sure.
Perfect. Then I'm calling back the teams breakout room. They'll come back in a minute, and then we can start. All right. I'm just waiting on everybody to come back to the main meeting, and then we can start. Right. I hope everybody is here. Can we do a quick roll call? OG, are you here?
Yes, we are here.
All right. OO,
We are here.
CG,
Yeah, we're here.
CO.
We're here.
Perfect. Before I hand over to Bhargav, a couple of instructions. Please, like, if you can, please do ensure that your cameras are switched on. Not only would it ensure that the debate becomes slightly more interactive, we're live streaming this debate, which means that generally also it will be more fun for the people who are watching. Secondly, if you want to ask POIs, put it up in the chat box. Do not unmute yourself and ask the speaker. Don't interrupt the speaker by unmuting yourselves. And thirdly, one like Riju would be going ahead and sharing his screen with the timer. You can see the timer, and we'll also be dropping text in the chat box at 1, 6, and 7. Is that cool? All right, I'm assuming it's cool. And Bhargav, over to you.
Thanks a lot. I just wanted to confirm if I'm audible to you.
You're audible.
Wonderful. All right. Welcome to the novice finals of SBS PD 21. I have with me on panel Abir, Avi, Shirish, and Svikriti. I would quickly want the teams to like introduce themselves. Let us know if there are any preferred pronouns, starting from opening government.
Hello, our preferred pronouns are she, her. My preferred pronoun.
The second speaker, the other speaker.
Hello, yes, everyone. My preferred pronouns are she/her.
All right. Thank you. Open our position.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Shivam and my preferred pronouns are he and him.
Great. The other speaker.
Hello everyone, myself Naman Gota. My proper pronunciation is him.
All right. Closing government.
Hi, I'm Parth, and my preferred pronouns are he/him.
All right. The second speaker for closing.
Hi, I'm Rishit and my preferred pronouns are he, him.
All right. I think we missed closing government for some reason. CG, are you here?
Hi, I'm Shashank, and my preferred pronouns are he/him.
All right. The second speaker.
I'm Utkarsh. My preferred pronouns are he, him.
All right. Wonderful. We can now begin the debate. So, without any further ado, I'd invite the Prime Minister to open the case inside government. Here.
Hello, can I possibly get time on the chat or by minute waves perhaps? The screen is really distracting.
Sure. I'll just give you a reminder at 1, 6, and 7 if that works.
I have a question.
Yes, great.
What's the procedure for asking POIs? Do we unmute ourselves or do we add it to the chat?
So the default procedure is asking questions via chat. If a speaker prefers to be interrupted, we can let others know before.
I just like it if you kept, put it in the chat. Thank you. Should I start?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So, starting in 3, 2, 1. It's happened. We as humanity have finally done it, and we've undergone a nuclear Armageddon, but somehow we've had survivors. What's the most imperative thing that we need to keep in mind now is to ensure the survival of these survivors and to ensure that whatever happened that led to this possible apocalypse does not happen again. All right. Now, there's some key ideas I think we need to keep in mind here. One, how does inequality come about in human beings? Two, how these physical and intellectual traits are actually going to be differences are actually going to be beneficial to us. Three, how this is not going to factionize society. And four, how this comes back to play in X's decision. One, how does inequality come about in human beings? First, we tell you that it is not physical and intellectual traits alone, but generations of pitting these traits against each other. How does this happen? When say, for example, the people in power, perhaps a colonizer, takes over a colony, they're more likely to impose the traits that they prefer over the people that they've colonized. Right? We've seen this happen through history, because of which, as a society, we prefer fair-skinned people, we prefer Eurocentric traits, etc. Right? Why does this happen? Because of generations and ages of these colonizers holding a position of power, a position of authority, where they had absolute control over all aspects of life over these people. We tell you that is how this inequality in terms of preference in terms of physical and intellectual traits alone comes about. Why is this important? In this world where these individuals can still own property, collect resources, hoard resources, we tell you that they will still be creating inequalities on the basis of who gets to hoard these resources the most. Right? You will not be eradicating the very problem where these physical and intellectual differences and discrimination on the basis of these ideas comes about. That is in the form of hoarding resources, in the form of exploiting people to gain more power on your side. Right? Secondly, the idea of these physical and intellectual traits, if they're all same, imagine a society where we all think the same, we all look the same, our physical traits are same, means that none of us can specialize in a trait. Why is that detrimental, particularly in this post-apocalyptic society? Is because these are individuals who now need to rebuild human society as we know it. Right? It becomes imperative, one, to place our strength in this heterogeneity, and two, place the value of building society with creativity. Why is that important? Because throughout human history, whenever we have needed to take a step forward, we've needed innovation, we've needed creativity, we've needed thinking outside of the box. And the minute that op comes here and makes all of us exactly think the same and look the same and feel the same, where is this innovation going to come from? Where is this creativity going to come from? Further, the idea of specialization in certain traits. We need certain individuals to go out and recognize which foods are poisonous for us, which foods are good for us to eat. We need some individuals to be empathetic, to recognize the needs of individuals, to provide them support in times of need, and they're good at that. We need some individuals who are more logic oriented, who will be able to direct us in terms of create equal distribution of resources. We need some individuals to build society. We need them to be physically stronger than other people, so that they can build roads, they can build buildings, they can build shelter, which is most likely one of the most important things that people need to now build towards, because of the possible consequences of a nuclear apocalypse, which is things like acid rain, which is things like protecting them from radiation. So we do need certain people to have these specializations. Right? Why is this, and why is this not going to factionize the society? Because everybody is different. We tell you that we still need leaders to we still need some people to make decisions. Right? in their world where everybody thinks the same, looks the same, is the same, the only factor that comes into play is one, like I said, who holds the most resources or has the most resources. So they're more likely going to bribe their members to take positions of power or take them by force, which is possibly going to lead to but like more on like how that force comes about later. Third, the idea that pride comes into play, right? Individuals will still have pride. Individuals will still want to impose their own ideas over the others. And we tell you that in this world, we don't want that happening, right? I'll take your POI in a little bit. Third, sorry, yes. Okay, here's where I come back to X. We need you to very clearly understand that X could be anyone, or cannot come here and tell us that she's necessarily somebody privileged, fair-skinned, Eurocentric features, or she's skinny, or she's obese. She could be of any race or any descent, because one, it has not been cleared out in the motions context, and secondly, she quite literally could be anybody, right? Because we don't know who are the people who survived this apocalypse. So in this case, whoever she may be, we tell you that she still has a right to bodily autonomy and taking decisions for herself. Now, let's look at this idea at an individual level. At an individual level, I, as an individual, no matter what my community thinks, should be able to decide for myself what is the best course of action for my life, for what I want to do. Because consider what has just happened in the world, right? All of these people have been forced to change everything about their life, have been forced into a position where survival has become imperative. In such a world, we want them to still be able to have some sense of identity, something familiar to their past, something that they can hold on to, so that they have the strength to keep going on. And in this world where they strip these individuals even of their identity, they strip X of even of the one thing she holds familiar, that is her sense of self. Why is it that in this new apocalypse she even has, what is the hope, what is she working towards, what is the motive that she has to keep going? She doesn't, right? This is what brings me to another idea, which is why this apocalypse most likely came about in the past, right? But before I go into that, any POIs?
Yeah, so you talk about your concern about, can you hear me? Yeah, so you talk about your concern about how, there's a concern that one person will wield a lot of power. But don't you think that problem actually exists even further on our side, where you have one person who has different intellectual superiority or a different race? Won't they get that benefit, and that'll trickle down towards multiple generations?
Got it. Thank you for that question. Here's what brings me to this next idea, which is why this apocalypse most likely came about. It was individuals, it was in a heterogeneous society that certain individuals wanted to create some sense of identity, of equality, some fickle sense of equality. What do I mean by this? Wherein they wanted to strip people of their representation and make decisions on their behalf, right? They were forcing equality or homogeneity on individuals. Why am I coming to this conclusion? Is because we've seen this happen in human history before, when the apocalypse happened, when Hitler promised an entire nation that they were going to go towards prosperity, they were going to go towards equality, they were going to go towards ensuring the best possible education, the best possible healthcare, but at the cost of an entire civilization that they deemed were bad traits, that were physically detrimental traits, that they were intellectually detrimental traits, right? And that is a point of time wherein they eradicated this entire community. And this is where I bring to you a macro analysis, which is that of manufactured equality, which is something that every dictator throughout history has done. Gaddafi has done this, every majoritarian government has done this, that in order to create greater, what we need is to create greater acceptance of our differences, because we need to accept that human beings will always be different, and that is what we need to work towards on-site gov, proud to propose.
I thank Speaker for that speech. Now invite the Leader of Opposition.
Just in 10 seconds. So, okay, greetings to the chair adjudicator. Me as a leader of opposition would highlight few of the points that they mentioned, that the side government came and mentioned throughout their speeches. They questioned that people in power impose themselves on on others, undermining very human nature. So we would like to hear mention that we also want these things, that we are believing that the reason of this soul inequality is lies in very purpose of having then people, when person A is not equals to B, then comes the question of power race for B, because B is the one who is unequal to A, and A is more powerful than B. Then B tries and B struggles and tries to protect his interest and to protect his interest in comparison to A, then the question comes of power race. And B hereby side government is proposing this solution of equalizer. What this will certainly do, this will remove the inequality widespread in the society, which is widespread in the whole world, when one person is superior and other person is inferior. So there is a superior complex and inferior complex created in the society. There will always be conflicts and tendencies to domination will be there, because just of the reason that we have inequalities in the society. So what this equalizer certainly would do, this equalizer will reconfigure every physical and intellectual trait of a person. This will not underdevelop them. This will not remove the intellectual from their part. This will just, what this certainly would do, this will provide them a equal level of intellectual development and reconfigures their thoughts so that they don't think in such a manner that they are superior from the other persons. And what this will certainly do, this will create a median value in the society and provide a more egalitarian society where every person thinks equally, looks equally, and there is no differentiation at all. There lies no equality. Then the question of power struggle doesn't come at all. And the second point which side government mentioned, they says that if they will look same, there will be no chance of development. That is again a vague assertion. How that will going to happen, they completely unable to explain that point. We will explain you that when all the persons are equal in the society, they will collectively work with the same mind, and the thinking process will be same. They will collectivize, and they will work for the society, for the better development of all. The social ills of inequality will not be there. Then society would be a for sure better place. Why it will be a better place? Because what is the need of having leaders or government in our society? The need is having it to ensure that development of society takes place, and the purpose of having welfare of person goes smoothly and without any interruption. So there is no race of power in our case if we use this equalizer and reconfigures every physical and intellectual trait that a person has. So they said that this is not in clear in motion, but it is very commonsensical. For us, we as a side opposition, because when equality is not will be there, there will be no threat like nuclear holocaust. We would prove this example. We would prove this point with a certain example. We would like to quote here the scenario after the World War II. What happened after the World War II? Post World War II, there was a race among the countries to acquire the nuclear weapons among them. Then the nuclear proliferation treaty came. So what this nuclear proliferation treaty certainly was, this is a sub part of this nuclear holocaust. This is a very minute part, and we hereby providing a more nuanced solution at a larger scale. We are just not making it a compliance burden. We are making it mandatory, and the future which side government is providing in their case, survival will become imperative. There will be no question of survival if such holocaust tends to be there. If the sword of holocaust will be there on the whole world, there will be no question of survival comes into their paradigm. No question of survival is there in their paradigm. Hitler proposed equality. Hitler provides Germany a view that you are the one who have lost and Western powers have beaten you. They provided them that, okay, this Germany in this case is B, which is unequal to A, and A is West. And some person comes to you and provides a false narrative that we would provide you the power and we would make you equals to the A. Then person tends to believe that, because the sole purpose of inequality is just for the sole purpose of inequality gives birth to the race to power. And what happens when we have equalizer in the society? It reconfigures society equally and make every person equal in the society. One can't sustain such a society for a longer run which side government provided, and the hanging sword will always be there and till we use this equalizer sort of problem. So there are certain problems with this nuclear holocaust. What are these problems? The world depends on the whims and fancies of the one person who is superior to them, and such incident doesn't take place. We need to do this, and we need to take the call at the right time, because inequalities has resulted into colonialism, imperialism, apartheid. These are all the social ills which are resulted out of these inequalities in the society, and the sole reason why this inequality gave birth to such ill practices. These are so inhumane things that led to the deterioration of the whole humanity, because colonialism, imperialism, apartheid is something where A is unequals to B, and B feels that in order to get equality, they have to do revolution, they have to took weapons against the A, and A tries to undermine their voices, and A tries to establish their superiority. What this has certainly done, this has divided the world into three parts: first world, second world, and third world countries. The whole world is divided. So the first world consists of 16% of the population of the whole world, and the second and third worlds are the sole follower and boot camp follower of this first world. And looks like that the whole plan looks like that they are living on the mercy of the whims of the handful of the people, because whenever they will they will feel that their interests needs to be protected, they will do these nuclear holocaust type of activities. And this is not a superficial concern that we are mentioning. There is urgency of to protect our world from such nuclear holocaust will again tend to happen, because we have seen what happened in the Pearl Harbor. That we have witnessed in the history, what happened with Hiroshima and Nagasaki is certainly evident to us, in front of us, that what can happen when inequality is there in the society. The main purpose of having this equalizer is to remove this inequality from the society. The world will be a better place, and if inequalities will not be there, no question of race and government comes there in our paradigm. One's opinion, the X, they have not taken the X opinion into, we are not taking one person's opinion into consideration. We are looking at the collective future of the whole world, because no question of world comes here if we just having a myopic outlook towards the world. We are broadening our horizon because we are taking a firm action by using this equalizer, which will certainly remove all sort of inequalities from the society. That is the reason of the main race of power. Why do people feel that they need power or nuclear holocaust to protect their interest? When everyone's interest is protected, there will be no race like this, and there will be no domination where one tries to justify their supremacy on the others. So there will be no whims and fancies of one person, and future of the planet isn't at stake, because we are hereby proposing this equalizer, some sort of a solution, a more nuanced solution, because nuclear disarmament that we have seen was completely unable to fail to bring the equality in the society. And every country in this present status quo is proliferating weapons very quickly. So the sword of nuclear holocaust is hanging on the whole world, and we hereby is proposing a solution of equalizer that would certainly provide equality in the society and will remove all sort of evils in the society. So hence that's why we feel our case is better than inside governments, and we are extremely proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for the speech. Now invite the Deputy Prime Minister who is here.
I hope I'm audible and visible.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Just give me like 10 seconds and I'll begin. Right, starting in 3, 2, 1. All right, panel, you have to understand that, what we as government pointed out that how inequality initially comes about, and what the offside presents is that they're going to remove inequalities of physical features and intellect, and that is suddenly going to make the world not evil, and that's going to make the world peaceful, and all the things that they pointed out, right? I'm going to first of all elaborate on what we mean by how inequality comes about. My PM already explained a lot of things, but we're going to explain to you that how inequalities are created on who accumulates those resources, and how are you going to ensure that, when you create an equalizer, who is going to control that equalizer, and who is going to define that what intellect should be the basic intellect, and what physical features should be the admired or the desired physical features. When you do that, when you give someone the power to decide this, then you're ultimately putting them in a position of power, which again brings us back to the whole power imbalances argument that we're trying to put out. That why did Holocaust happen? It happened because there were power imbalances, and now you're creating another power imbalances by putting someone in the position of authority. By doing that, you are. Now, what's different when you do not do equalizer is that you do not take people's freedom to choose, which is where X comes into picture. That we are saying that there are more people like X who exist, right? So when more people like X exist, then you're taking away on a micro level their freedom to choose and the freedom to decide on bodily autonomy, which my PM clearly pointed out that how you cannot impose someone else's identity and someone else's features and someone else's intellect on another person, because this freedom, while not absolute, is inherent to humans, and it is what should be the basic requirement. Why is it important in a post-Holocaust world? Because the need for freedom increases. And why does it increase? Because intellect and physical features are celebrated differences. These are not political differences or inherently differences in resource accumulation, right? These are celebrated differences. These are what make us human in the first place, which is where we play out our argument of how you're manufacturing humans now. And what do you mean by you're manufacturing humans? That you're making everybody the same, you're making everybody think the same, you're making everybody look the same. How does that reduce inequality, and how does that ensure egalitarian society? All you are doing is that everybody looks the same, and what that in fact is doing, that this manufacturing humans ideology, what that doing is that it is suppressing what makes makes us human in the first place, which is in a sense a great human rights violation, just like the Holocaust that happened. So how does this human right violation differ from the human right violation that just happened? All right. Next of all, our Elo pointed out a lot of points, like how they believe in equality, that how they believe inequalities rise in power imbalances, but they never really tell you that how changing physical and intellectual features and making them the same is going to affect the political power imbalances that exist, which is the root cause of the Holocaust in the first place, right? Because equalizer does not encourage this, right? And they talked about how superior and inferior complex is generated. First of all, this superior and inferiority complex is amplified and magnified to political differences and privilege in the society, which is either way going to exist in your in the op world, and they never really explore that idea at all, right? Other than that, they say that our argument is vague. First of all, we have to tell you that how does a rebuilding society work in a post-Holocaust world? You need innovation. Without innovation, you cannot go ahead. And why do we say that innovation is important? Because our survival depends on it. How will you come up with development plans? How will you take care of environmental degradation that has happened, which is, by the way, will be a very grave concern after the Holocaust, because there's so much destruction that happened. How will you take care of PTSD in people and the survivors? How will you take care of the accommodation that is happening? You cannot do this without innovation. And innovation will only come about with people like Marie Curie, with people like Mother Teresa, people like Edison. And these are people who initially have like high intellect than other people, and these are celebrated differences because it makes us humans and it makes us work together collectively as a society, right? Which is where the whole argument of pride comes into play, that you all think the same, you all look the same. So don't you think there will be more conflict in that, right? Which the op does not turn upon at all. Other than this, we also find out that how when you look at the world as a world and in the wrong world and in the wrong run, you are taking away the freedom for people to choose, right? And what happens is that. And what happens when that happens is that there is no equal representation and equal say. You have to understand that inherent differences exist, which is where the whole op argument about Holocaust and non-proliferation treaty comes in. Why did the nuclear non-proliferation treaty did not play well into the world? Why? Because there are political power imbalances which still exist. So you cannot run that argument in the first place, right? Other than this, they provided a picture of how Hitler provided a picture of A is not equal to B, and then B is fighting for their rights and all that, and how this, race to power sort of reconfigures society, which is exactly, you are imposing one identity on another, which is exactly what Hitler was trying to do. He disagreed with the identity of Jews, right? So when you disagree with someone's identity and that is why the Holocaust happens, and then you reimpose their identity again, then how are you creating an egalitarian society? What you're doing is creating a preferred society, which is preferred by a certain political ideology, which is preferred by certain people, and that does not play into any human rights that we're talking about, right? Because post-Holocaust, human rights are amplified and they work more. I will take a POI if there is.
Okay, so my question to you is, can we undermine someone's positive liberty by introducing a myopic picture of negative liberty in a short run?
A myopic picture of negative liberty, right? So I assume you're trying to say that our side of the house is presenting you a very myopic picture, which I will elaborate on, that how this is actually a long-term solution. Because you're looking at rebuilding an entire society, you have to give them the liberty to choose, you have to give them the liberty to be who they are, you have to give them the bodily autonomy, because not only is it an inherent human right that exists, you can impose certain restrictions, but you cannot just take away the freedom to their identity, the freedom to choose who they want to be, which is actually anyways which is what is happening in the real world also. Like, you're imposing some person's identity on another. In a post-Holocaust world, this amplifies, the result of this amplifies, and in the long run, if you want to create a stable society which is like proud of its differences, which works together, we need these differences, we need these celebrated differences to exist, which is like physical features can exist, and differences can exist, and so do intellectual differences can exist, which we say that is not only important for the humans as a principle, but is also important for you which is also important in tangible ways, which is that you have to rebuild a society. You have to understand that we cannot rebuild a society without people having different abilities. You need a strong person to build houses, you need a mentally strong person to console others, and work for mental therapy and all that, because you need this specialization in society in order to go forward. And without this specialization, you cannot really rebuild a post-Holocaust world. What you will be building is a homogenized world which has no inherent power of its own, and it all thinks the same, and there will be no innovation which could have happened, or if the innovation happens, it will be very slow in the sense that it might not lead to survival, because in situations like these, we need to act fast, right? And we need leaders, and not only leaders do we need people who can, participate. We need different types of people to work different types of tasks, and this will in fact promote this the idea that we're trying to promote. All right, and this does not remove all sort of evil with the upset, and I would like it if they elaborate on that and engage with us on this. Proud to support.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Now invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Uh,
Yeah, in 10 seconds. Okay. So, you can start now. Yep. Respected adjudicator, and all my members present here, I would like to give some extensions to the points which is putting forward by my leader of the oppositions, and want to give some rebuttals to the points which will be putting forward by the side governments of the identity, about the capturing of the mind of the people, everyone making them zombies, like they are erasing all the intellectual level in them. So I will putting forward all the rebuttals to them also, and will give some extension to the non-proliferation treaty, and about the tendency of human beings to dominate, to make themselves superior, to make themselves portray superior as from the other human beings, and how this inequality portray in discrimination in the society and lead to the superiority of one human being, and lead to such type of destruction that we have shown in the nuclear holocaust. And in the real world, we have also shown in the World War era, when the Pearl Harbor and the Hiroshima Nagasaki happens. Now, I would like to start my case about the human's tendency. In the basic psychology, human has the tendency to dominate, to have some social accreditation, social validation, and to show himself as the superior from the other human beings. When this tendency arises from in the human beings to show themselves bigger than any other human beings, there the tendency arises to oppress the other human being, to show that you are lower than me, that show that A is bigger than B, by lowering that the B's tendency, or B's lowering that the voice of the B. Now, I will be giving some instances to that. What happened in the World War, and what was the case of the Hitler? The opposition pointed out that there should be a racial society, there should be a balanced society, there should be leaders who will be distribute the things racially, they will be distribute the things equally to everyone. I would like to ask a simple question. Before the nuclear holocaust, there was no leaders in the world, because of the leaders, because of their tendency, because of their aspiration to dominate the whole world, the aspiration to they portray themselves as superiors from the whole world. They take this life of the life on the stake of whole the humanity. We cannot take all the lives into stake in the hands of just a human beings and the aspirations of the one human being. While we are supporting the equalizers in our favor, the equalizer, we have putting forward that human tendency, and it will be aroused again and again. And if you some certain person have to survive, putting survival into existence in this whole world, if we want a human to survive, we want equalizer, because the equalizer will eradicate all the tendency to dominate, all the tendency, human psychological tendency to make social accreditation, to make themselves superior from any other being, to make a whole world of the peaceful world, or we can say not peaceful, you can say that the racial and equal world. So if this everyone is equal, there is no point arise of that I am bigger than you, and I want to dominate you. Or if that point of dominant and equality came, that the power, the two people will fight, the the destruction will happen of whole society, and the whole humanity's life is in the stake. And if you and I want to clarify one point of the which we has been putting forward, that they will capture all the intellect level, the equalizer will capture the all intellect level, and the identity of a human being. How can you show the identity of a human being in this equalizer? I will to show a one point here, that the equalizer here is to eradicate the general human tendency to dominate. It's not that we are capturing the normal intellect level to think, We're just giving that there will be no thinking of that I am bigger than the other person, and there will be no tendency of superiority to dominance, that social accreditation, social validation. So they will live peacefully, because how can you guarantee that it will not happen again and again? Because all other ourselves are human beings, and if your leaders are created, they also have the tendency to do so. And they're talking about the World War and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The Non-Proliferation Treaty are just a light version of the equalizer that we are talking about. The two world situation which has been created in the World War II situations, that they are increasing their nuclear arsenal at that time, and the first world country and second world countries are using the nuclear war arsenals and increasing that rapidly to show that one self is dominating the others. And the non-proliferation treaty is signed that Novel will increase their nuclear arsenal and again nuclear arsenal again. So it was just a light version of the equalizer that we are talking about, because if you do, certain human beings have the tendency to do so, to dominate anyone. But we have mentioned in that what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is the total destruction. And we can see the aspiration of one human being, one leader, that is mentioned in the Hitler also, that the world war arises and the whole humanity was in the stake of the one human being. We cannot do so. If the main reason of whole humanity is to survive, and if we want to survive, we cannot just put forward the same case again and again, that yes, we will do something different today, that will be putting forward the government, that we will distribute even resources and everything will be good. I want to just portray here just the leader, which has the leaders are also before that in nuclear holocaust. And if their leaders are also human beings, and they also have the tendency to dominate, that has happened in the World War era, that that the leaders are for the social welfare and making a society egalitarian society. We need human beings to eradicate this type of tendency to dominate, to become superior from each other. We need a equalizer which will eradicate these things from the structural level of the human beings, to make a social recognition and an accreditation, and lead to the peaceful society that we are looking forward. And moving ahead to the identity point that I have cleared before also, and I'm clearing again also, that the identity of the human beings is not captured. Identity of a particular human beings is portrayed by his skill, his knowledge, and his ability to do the things, not by his social dominance, his superiority, or anyone else points to oppress anyone, or by inequality, or to show him much bigger from anyone else. So make in the equal social welfare, in equal society, you can also identify yourselves by your skills, your knowledge, and other things also. Not inequality here will give you the social validation, or you will create other identity of yours. And moving ahead to the power imbalance that we are talking about. Oh, I am finished with my time. So just I want to complete with my points, that I have provided some strategies to the which has been putting forward by my LO, and giving some rebuttals to the point of identity and capturing of the whole mind, and capturing of the all intellectual level, which has been putting forward by the opening government, and providing some extension to the leader of the opposition, that they have to eradicate the tendency to dominate or become superior from each other. Thank you, sir.
I thank the speaker for that speech. I now invite the member of government here.
Okay, so is it okay if we keep the video camera off?
Yeah, that is completely fine.
Yes, I'd prefer to keep it off. I'll start in 10 seconds. Okay, so I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. Now, the government enthusiastically supports X's decision to not opt into the equalizer, for it realizes the value of individual choice. It celebrates the natural existent traits of human race, and it looks forward to building a full-fledged civilization of vibrant and exuberant human beings, which is inclusive of each other's realities rather than building an anthill of survivors. So, firstly, the government wants to put into perspective what exactly went wrong with the human past, which resulted in self-destruction of the human race, and why that is the basis of our stand on Miss X's decision. Now, as survivors, we identified inequality as the driving force for the destruction of human race. All of you might agree with this, but we wish to highlight that the lack of acceptance of uh, pluralistic identities, building hierarchies of high and low within these pluralistic identities, and forcing one's own ideas of appropriate identities in matters of gender and race upon those who are different from them, have been the key factors in propelling militant rivalries rather than the existence of pluralistic identities themselves. Here, I would like to rebut the points which are made by the opposition, where they continuously claim that the existence of inequality, the existence of differences was the basis of all conflict. Now, while it is true that inequality was a reason, but the reason for inequality, but the root cause of inequality was not the existence of differences, rather than creating high and low within these differences, rather than negative interactions between these differences, where someone had preformed notions and prejudices about someone else's identity. And today, if we impose uniformity without the consent of the concerned human being today, we might end up being what imperialism and fascism were yesterday. So we will end up repeating the same mistake. We cannot repeat the same mistake of enforcing our ideas upon a proud girl who does not fit into our systems of what's right and wrong, because that way we'll end up doing the same mistake. Further, let's understand the consequences of our approach. Let's understand the consequences if our approach is otherwise of what the government proposes. Firstly, we'll understand the genetic, biological, social, cultural, and economic consequences of this process. Firstly, the genetic consequences. Now, people like X opting out of the program can end up preventing the destruction of survivor civilization, even if slight changes in the ecosystem of this planet takes place. Because according to the principles of natural selection and mutation, these principles ensure that when a calamity hits a specific species, then the existence of diverse traits within these species produces a diverse response to the particular calamity, and those with a favorable response are naturally selected because they survive, and these favorable traits are passed on to the next generation of species. A puritanical approach to equalization will destroy all the possibility of natural selection and pose a very serious threat to the survival civilization, while surviving is our top priority now rather than imposing any artificially created social order. Coming to the social and cultural consequences, from the past experience, we know that festivities, dance, music, art, and all kinds of artistic expressions, they always transcended the borders and boundaries of nationhood and race. They were our refuges. They were our refugees. We sought refuge in them in the worrying times and when we were at war. Now, enforcing a uniform character and intellectual traits will completely destroy all the probability of flourishing any kinds of art. Uh, Back home in India, we had festivals which celebrated womanhood, we had literature, we had poetry that poured out of people who came from very diverse traits, cultural backgrounds, educational fields, and those who had very different kinds of priorities in their lives. All these artworks came from very varied communities. For instance, the Muslims of Dhaka, the Sambalpuris of India, and the Ajraks of Sindh were garments which were garments created by diverse communities which had immense rivalry with each other. But the trade of these garments created such a positive interaction between various groups in South Asia, where all the communities, castes, and nations were at war with each other. But this created a positive environment of interaction where people wore clothes woven by each other, which brings us to the next point, that skills like weave and cuisine will be completely killed if we impose uniformity in a very puritanical approach, because these skills essentially come from diverse traits of human beings. Every weave in this in our previous country used to be of a different kind, because every weaver was brought up in a different way. Every weaver's fingers were accustomed to working out in a different way, and something very similar went ahead with the cuisine aspect of this as well. Finally, coming to the point of economy, building a civilization, the prime goal should be building an economy as well. a diverse set of skills is the basis of all economic activity. Let me tell you how. So when there's a very diverse set of skills, this essentially will lead to a diverse produce. A variable produce is possible only when the people who are producing them are different in some kind of way. When produce is diverse, one man will wish to exchange his product with the other, and this is the base of all trade and all economic activity. Diverse produce will result in trade. Trade will bring into picture tradesmen and organization and infrastructure for trading, which will generate revenue. Revenue drives governments, revenue creates cities, and revenue goes on. And these cities, these governments, these institutions, at the end of the day, develop an entire civilization. Finally, a young girl who celebrated her womanhood like none other, who celebrates a womanhood like none other, who feels joyful about who she is without feeling the need to make a forced change, should rather be a role model for this group of survivors who have a crushed civilization at their back. She represents a zeal to live and stand for her existence. She represents a zeal to she represents a zeal to stand up and take a strong stand for who she is, and that's why we must encourage this spirit rather than crushing it. Also, this puritanical approach will sow the seeds of fascism, will sow the seeds of further enmity, because because it will create partisanship and factions within this segment of population. And since we seek to survive, any topic which is controversial to the extent that it creates factions within the segment of population, and factions who can be at war with each other, will be very detrimental. And we, as a group of survivors, need to avoid that at all costs. That is why the opposition strongly feels and backs Ms. X's decision of opting out of this specific program. Thank you. That's it from the closing opposition side.
All right. I thank the speaker for their speech. Now invite the member of opposition. You here?
Hi, could you confirm that I'm audible and if I am visible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Cool. Let me just check. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Okay, so I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel, let me contextualize this debate for you, right? And something that every single side has missed until now, right? We need to understand the context that this debate is set in, right? And what we're talking about is a post-nuclear Holocaust, right? The main motivation at this point of time is the preservation of the human race, and we need to rebuild society, right? We're not talking about the world as it existed before the nuclear war, right? We'll debate you on that on a different day. Today, we need to prioritize the progress, the cooperation, and unity, and fundamentally, the preservation of life, right? And we'll show you how in our paradigm, on their paradigm, they completely fail to recognize this, right? Now, most of side government's argumentation comes from the fact that there's a lack of a counter model, right? They talk about how there's one person in charge of this machine, right? And first of all, we'll tell you two things. A, there's not one individual in charge of standardizing the median value. We'll give you a counter model for this. A, that society agrees on a fixed median value. This value can undergo change over different generations. After every generation, we'll review the fixed median value to find the best possible one, right? That's a counter model that satisfies most of side government's argumentation, right? Now, a few rebuttals before I come to our constructives, right? First of all, they talk about how colonizers are the reason why imbalance and inequality creeps in, crept into the post-Holocaust world, and how that won't happen again, right? And in the same breath, the side opposition comes up and they start talking about telling us natural selection, right? And social Darwinism. And we tell you that you can't have both of these, right? You can't say that, yes, social Darwinism exists, natural selection exists, that when one set of individuals are superior to one, and they start taking over the other situation, that exists. But you know what? Also, because there's no colonizers, this imbalance won't come in, right? So that point completely falls on its face, right? Number two, and here's where they lose out on most of the debate, right? They talk to you about different roles, right? They tell you about different roles in society, how we need people to build roads, we need people to do this task, we need people to do this task, right? Here's where it's a very surface value argument, and why they won't ever get into what the argument actually means, right? how do you determine which person carries out which role, right? In our society, in an egalitarian society where everyone is uniform, you do it based on the skill and interest and the merit of that person to carry out that position, right? In their world, where you have people where there's an imbalance between people who have like different a different genetic or a gender, a different racial thing, not right now. What happens then? You start pushing women into child rearing groups, you start pushing men to build the roads. You stand this racial this minoritized group to do this task, and here's why the entire case falls flat on its face, right? Because in their model, when they talk about pushing minorities, pushing groups into different roles, that's exactly what we stand against, right? Then other side also talks about how consent, about how a trade will stop existing, culture will stop existing, individuality will stop existing. No, because as their opening government came and stirred us, you are not defined by your physical traits, you're defined by your memories, experience, stuff that we're not taking away from you. So it falls completely flat on its face that these things will go away, right? Now, coming to constructives. First of all, they tell you that rights are absolute, right? And we reject this, right? When they tell you that the right of choice is absolute and it supersedes everything, no, we tell you that the right to life of the society, that the right to life of every member in that society supersedes one individual's right to choice, right? And that right to life is fundamentally irreducible, and we will not stand for any other thing, right? Now, the debate isn't between should everyone in this egalitarian world choose a uniform thing or should they allow to exist as an individual. This debate is about whether one person X in a world where there's a universal acclaim and we can infer that most people are choosing to like undergo this procedure. Do we prioritize the needs of the few or do we prioritize the needs of the lives of the many, right? And in a world where billions of lives, in a world where there are billions of lives on the planet before the Holocaust, I'll debate you on like this entire trolley problem situation on another day. But in this society where we've established that our goal is to maximize life because we have a duty to preserve the human race, we do not stand for this individualist outlook of protecting someone's right to choice over the right to life, right? Number two, what are the benefits of this society, right? Something that like our opening opposition was never able to properly convey, right? First of all, in the utilitarian society that we propose, first of all, collective happiness is maximized. Why? Because we tell you that there is an absence of differences. We tell you that we're maximizing progress in the absence of inequality, in the absence of discrimination. We tell you that we start focusing in society based on its merits. We start advancing a more progressive society that does not stand on any inequality or discrimination or differentiation between your physical traits, between your intellectual traits, and it stands for who is the most qualified to do the job, right? And we believe that this society is the most productive society that will be lapse of any like problems that led to the Holocaust that sprung this debate, right? Number two, they'll tell you that like society doesn't have the right to like dictate whether this person should be individuals. A, the motion is about this house supporting there's no idea of forced consent. Two, even if like we want to take that social contact, like basic social contact theory says that when in this post-apocalyptic world, there's a few members of society left, and you want to be a part of the society because you want to preserve the human race. If you want to reap the benefits of the society, if you want to participate in the society and all of its like structures and everything, not right now, you also have to abide by the rules that are set in place that are and in any like obviously if it's a functional society, then obviously the rules are set in place to maximize the productivity and the benefits of the society, right? And that's like one of our main points about utilitarianism and how it acts out in this point. Number three, why is it beneficial for a society that is trying to survive to make an individual indistinguishable, right? Right now, on that paradigm, you have different groups, you have different segregations between A group, B group, C group, and you have like this, whenever you have to make a decision, you have to consider, okay, but there is a cognitive bias if you have to incorporate something about A, you have to incorporate something about B, right? On our paradigm, when we standardize physical traits and we standardize your intellectual traits to a median value, now everyone is a human, right? Very reductive, but everyone is basically a number right now, right? And when we want to preserve human life, now it's very easy to make decisions for a society to maximize the benefits of like the functioning of the society, because now you can logically find the most optimum solutions without harming any misrepresenting a population, because you can make these decisions without in the absence of any cognitive biases, right? And lastly, one of the things that hasn't been discussed at all is the benefits of this individual. Right now, we're talking about from a third point of view about how the society benefits if this person participates, right? Let's talk about why this person in X would actually benefit from like undergoing this procedure, right? A, we've already known in the motion that we know that there is a universal claim, so we can already infer that the majority of people in the world will already be participating in this, right? What happens when you have one individual and let's say like 5 to 10 individuals in a society of like thousands, where you have these 5 to 10 people springing up, right? there are two schools of thought. One, they become all powerful and they start overruling everyone and starting bringing about authoritarian policies. Something that I asked them in the PR, but they never got back to us, never clashed with us about it. Number two, let's say they're in a deductive way from the median value. They get discriminated against, they get resentment, and they have no quality of life, right? Because we show you that the benefits of the society, we benefit the human race, we benefit this individual itself, and because we successfully combat every single argument that other side brings, we are very, very proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Now invite the government whip to conclude the submission from the side government. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, perfectly clear.
Right, thank you. Starting in 5 seconds. Just Respected educators, members of the government bench, members of the opposition bench, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we are here before debating a motion that has been brought in by our government, brought in by the government, that the decision of the individual X to not opt into equalizer should be allowed, and we stand strongly in favor of this motion. Firstly, I will be going through some of the ways, I will be summarizing the debate in the sense by going through some of the clashes that have been brought up in the debate. I will then go through points that have been made by the members of the opposition, leader of the opposition, deputy leader of the opposition, the prime minister, deputy prime minister, and I will finally conclude with comprehensively finishing saying how our bench, the closing government has won the battle and has easily won the debate, has easily proved its point is the most valid point and the most important point. Firstly, the clashes. In the opening half, we witnessed quite a few clashes that were quite well debated. We witnessed clashes about how inequality would permeate in a post-nuclear Holocaust society between the leader of the opposition and the deputy prime minister. That was one clash we witnessed. Other clash we witnessed was how society would progress in a scenario after this nuclear Holocaust, with differing views on both sides, on the government side and on the opposition side. The government side advocating for a diverse society to move forward, while the opposition side advocating for a homogeneous one-person society to move forward. And lastly, through these clashes, we have been able to discover that there is a fundamental difference between the government and the opposition benches in their belief in what is human nature, what is human capability, which is a point I will come back to in my conclusion. Right. So firstly, I will go down with the opening government. The opening government made a few points that were quite relevant to the debate, but ultimately did not manage to completely cover the scope of argument and did not manage to counter all the points that the opposition had raised in. The opening government, however, did talk about inequality, about how pitting of people against each other was the cause for inequality, and how eradicating of inequalities would be a point here, and how exploitation and hoarding is something that was a prime factor into leading up into the pre-nuclear Holocaust. They talked about how a heterogeneous society would curtail creativity, would destroy and hurt a lack of personal identity and a sense of self, and there would be no motive to move forward in society. And finally, they brought forward why different types of people and why diversity is important, but they unfortunately did not expound on this, which is something which we would see expounded upon later. The opposition benches, however, brought in several points that have been rebutted and which will be rebutted, and several other points which will be rebutted now. The leader of the opposition said one cannot sustain a government as has been sustained pre-Holocaust, saying one cannot sustain a diverse society government. Unfortunately, we have seen until this nuclear Holocaust, that for millennia we have been sustaining a society that has existed on diversity. So the problem is not in existential terms of the society. The problem is, how did society get to the point? How did inequalities reach to the point? And what sort of inequalities, what were the permeating factors for inequalities to reach till where we reached the Holocaust? It is not a problem in terms of diversity. Then the leader of the opposition also said he also stated that the equalizer would not underdevelop certain set of people. Yet, by the very definition of the equalizer, considering that it is mapped to median, it would effectively undevelop around 50% of society if it's mapped to median. The leader of the opposition also talked about human tendency putting survival above how human tendency we should be going to ensure survival among all ends. But there's no sort of survival in terms of there is no sense of survival if there is no sense of humanity. A point I will come back to a bit in the future. There is no, while they also talked about how the activities that have been carried out by multiple leaders in the past, like Hitler, dictators, were inhuman social ills. Yet they have failed to provide that in a post-equalizer society where everyone is the same and there's no concept of any sort of dissent. What does the definition of being human even mean? They have not given any point on that. To guarantee that the opposition proposal, the proposal of the opposition to deny the person X the right to take this is in effect not doing anything different. It's like it is effectively permeating the same goals that these fascist leaders, which they have talked about, were permeating. That you cannot differ, that you cannot dissent, it is not allowed. There would be no difference in skills. The member of the opposition said there would be no difference in skills. So the classification of the member of the opposition said that there would be difference in skills, so different people, different skills could go to different works. Unfortunately, there would be no difference in skills. So the classification of work, the model provided by the member of the opposition, does not hold, unfortunately. And now I will go forward and state how the member of government, how the closing government bench has clearly won the debate. The member of government pointed out how the importance of value of individual choice, the celebration of natural traits, and how a full-fledged, vibrant, inclusive society is very integral and important. He elaborated on what went wrong. The member of government elaborated on what exactly went wrong in society and how inequality was the defining factor. Within equality, the biggest problem would be the lack of acceptance of pluralism and the forcing of identities on others, causing social divisions. He also pointed out in very succinct and well pointed out points the consequences of such equalizers. The genetic consequence of not of affecting Darwinian evolution, the social causes and consequences, the economic consequences, and pointed out how society's the bedrock of civilization is built on how an economy is built. The consequences of different skills like cuisine and textiles, he pointed that out. And the member of government also pointed out completely throughout his speech, also rebutted multiple points that have been brought up by the members of the opposition benches across all sides. Now, finally, we will go and finish out with a last few set of points. Firstly, there's no nuance brought in the stance by the opposition. It will keep society static. It will keep society normal. I think I've reached the last minute, so I don't think POIs are allowed. Sorry, I don't think POIs are allowed anymore. There's no nuance in the position of the opposition. It will keep society static. It will keep society stagnant. It will not advance society in any sense forward. Lastly, I said in the beginning of my speech that I would go and elaborate on the fundamental difference between government and the government bench and the opposition, the closing government and the opposition benches in their belief, in their approach to humanity. Ultimately, the opposition's case, if I may say so, is summed up by a very simple statement. They argue that humans do not have the autonomous agency to survive on their own. They do not have the autonomous agency to survive on their own. That given left to their own free will, they would not be able to survive. They should be subjugated. They cannot be left on their own devices. And if that is the in whole summary of what the opposition has to say, and we as government obviously strongly do not believe in that. The fact that this debate is taking place means that humanity, and the fact that beyond the Holocaust, the immense amount of technologies, the immense progress the human race has made, shows that this entire crux of the debate, as the opposition has been moving forward, does not stand. And so I proudly rest out the case of the government, and we believe that we have clearly won this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the opposition whip to conclude the debate. Here.
Am I audible?
Oh, yes, you are.
Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, as my member of opposition very rightly pointed out, none of the teams here seem to understand the severity of the situation and what world we live in right now. All of them seem to be dealing with a vast variety of issues, from arts and culture to innovation in different aspects. However, what they don't seem to understand is there is a nuclear holocaust that has taken place and has eradicated most of humanity. And one more very crucial point, which they seem to keep missing on, even though my member of opposition brought it up, is that majority, in fact, there is overwhelming amount of support for the equalizer, despite all the differences in society right now, even after the Holocaust. Despite that, everyone seems to agree on one thing, that is that our differences caused this. Our differences got us to this point, and this cannot happen again. This is something which the opening government does not seem to understand at all. Let me tell you why. Let me start with why opening government and closing government were not comprehensive enough against why this equalizer should not be used, and they're not able to give us any benefits of not using it. And then I'll move on to how opening opposition did not nuance their arguments enough. Starting with opening government. Now, they think that everybody, inequality, they talked about how inequalities came about, and now they think that inequalities will still exist based on who gets the resources. However, we are preemptively avoiding this by using the equalizer, as we are removing the whole concept of social classes and discrimination based on certain physical attributes, which was the reason we came to this point in the first place. We want to remove all those factions and make everyone equal, and then resources can be, divided in a very equitable manner. They think that everyone will think the same and look the same, but this is not true, because everyone will not think the same. Just because they have the same, physical features or intellect does not mean they will be thinking the same. Our thought process and our skill set as well, which is what by closing government, is not solely defined by these two factors. In fact, it is defined by our experiences, our interests, our memories. None of these things which are being taken away. All of these things will still exist in our paradigm. It is just that we will make everyone look a certain way and think make their intellectual level to a certain level to make them equal, not to remove their past experiences and their memories and what they are interested in. Moving on, the opening government seems to stress upon the point of innovation, physical strength, etc. However, like my member of opposition very rightly pointed out, who will decide who will be assigned these roles, the roles of power, the leadership roles which are going to be in the society we are rebuilding? This will again be based on the inherent biases which exist in society and which we have to remove now if we have to survive as a species, because most of our species has been eradicated exactly because of these differences. Once we remove these differences, that is the only way we can think of moving forward of any sort of progress or survival. Okay. Next, opening government talks about how X could be anyone. X is not specified, in their in a racial sense or in a bodily sense, and we agree with that. But the problem with allowing this one member, even though there is overwhelming support for this technology, as my member of opposition has already pointed out, is that these people, there can be two scenarios here. Either X is intellectually superior and physically, in a place of superiority compared to the average population after this, which will lead to very huge problems such as, them exerting their power over vast majority of people, which is not to be allowed. Or secondly, if they are, at an inferior, socially inferior place, then they will be actively discriminated against. In fact, this will happen either way, because society, when most of them are looking a certain way and thinking a certain way, then this one individual who wants to retain how they look and how they think is not going to be okay, because they will actively be discriminated against and cannot be incorporated into a society like this. That won't work at all. In fact, will cause even more differences, which is exactly what we are trying to avoid on our side of the house. Okay. Next, the opening government brought up a very naive point, which was that apocalypse was because of manufactured inequality, and now we need to work towards equality. This is what we have been doing throughout. This is what our history is made of. This is what led us to the nuclear holocaust, and is definitely not going to work now. If it did not work over the millennia, humans have existed. Now we will talk a little bit about the closing government's points. The closing government stressed very highly on arts and culture and cuisine, and what they don't seem to understand is that is not the priority here. Yes, maybe eventually in a future society we will start worrying about things like that, but right now what we need to worry about is survival. Different people have different cultures, different arts. First of all, these cultures are not being removed. They're all a part of their memories, and which whoever wants to give priority to it can. But this is not our priority right now. Our priority is survival, which is something which the closing government does not seem to understand, because over here, after nuclear holocaust, I don't think anybody is going to be worried about leaving. Yes, I'll be taking that POI now.
So don't you think? Okay, so don't you think that economics and genetics are two very integral factors into building a civilization or protecting survival? Since you mentioned that the closing government only talked about culture or civilization.
Okay, so yes, we do believe that economics and what was the other thing? Genetics are a very important point. Coming to that, my member of opposition has rightly pointed out that genetic selection, and natural selection is outweighed in today's world, especially as a human, by social Darwinism. That is the biases we have created by ourselves, because we have evolved to a point where natural selection does not really apply to us. In fact, social selection is what applies highly, which is something we are trying to remove. We're trying to make everyone, give them an equal footing in our new society to make sure such differences do not arise based on very meager factors, but very big factors in our past world, such as, racial color, etc. Now, moving on. They say that the closing government seems to make the point that making everyone go for this equalizer will sow seeds for further enmity and factions created. These factions already exist. These factions are the reason we are in the situation right now. We are in right now. We are trying to erase these factions, and the fact that they don't seem to recognize this means we have failed this debate completely. Now, moving on to opening opposition, while they did bring up a good point about equality and how it is very important, they completely missed out the point of X and why this individual should not be allowed to do it over the needs of the society. Because when you are a part of a society, there are certain rules you abide by. There are certain rules you should be a part of. And X, if she wants to reap the benefits of the society she lives in, then she also has to follow the rules the society imposes, which are not even unreasonable, which is something the whole society agrees on. If she does not believe in the society, then why is she a part of it? She should not be. Okay? This is something the opening opposition failed to deal with completely. Now, moving on to some other points which are brought up by the debate. Okay, no, now to sum up our case, because most points seem to be covered, we think that the equalizer should definitely be used. Number one, because most of humanity recognizes how important it is. Despite our differences, we seem to agree that this is what caused and led to our downfall, and this is something we should be avoiding now. And number two, the reason X as an individual should not be allowed to do this is because it will lead to, either major discrimination, which is something we want to erase, or an unfair, sort of advantage to someone who does not deserve that advantage, who has done nothing for that advantage. Finally, we do not believe that skill sets and identity are based on just our physical attributes and our intellect. In fact, it is based on our interests, our past experiences, our thoughts, our memories, and you cannot erase anyone's identity with this. You are just trying to make sure everybody gets off on an equal footing. And with this, we are very, very proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for their speech. I'd request the Ofcom to maybe send us to a breakout room.
Yeah, I'm just
Matthew, how
allocating
would
you
it work?
Yeah, I'm just
All right.
allocating you to breakout room. The debaters can leave this room. We will be announcing the results of novice finals together with the results of the grand finals in the closing ceremony. So if you want, the debaters can leave. We will send the link to the closing ceremony on the Discord channel. I'll just assign the adjudicators to Bhargav, Abir, Swikriti, Avi, and Shirish. Right, 5 people. Cool. Right. I've assigned all of you. The debaters need not join. The